And we are live.
Hey, well, welcome everybody. Session 5 of the Deficiency Book Tour. Hard to believe that this has been 5 weeks since we started on this tour. It's been fascinating to personally to be a part of these. I think been a gift from me in the sense that I kind of get a chance to hear 5 phenomenal conversations firsthand and do my little bit to play my little role to whatever value I can add. I do my best. So I'm excited for today, and specifically today we're going to dive a bit more into and focus a bit more on mindset. And as you may have seen in some of the previous sessions, where we've had a bit more of a question and answer format, we're hoping today for a bit more of storytelling, maybe a little bit more of a dialogue. You can hear some terrific personal stories today to again add value to your experience. And so follow along, ask questions, refer back to other episodes, and we're glad that you're all here today. So I'm going to go ahead and briefly just introduce everybody, and we'll get going. So my name is Blair Primus. I work for a company called Ortho Carolina, and we're a multi-specialty orthopedics practice. We're based in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're one of the largest in the country, and I am fortunate to have been here 11 and a half years now. And I have 3 departments that I'm a part of, and I have found through my time getting to know Brittney and through this book tour that a lot of what's going on here around emotional intelligence and a lot of the conversations that we're a part of are directly applicable to the roles that I play in culture and communications, marketing, and human resources, which is my function here. I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV. And I think that you'll find, hopefully, some of the same value that I get out of these, and if you have a similar types of roles in your organization. So I'm just going to go ahead and briefly introduce Brittney and have her just quickly explain, why write the book? Why is it so important? What about mindset do you think has led you to put some of these words down on paper or digitally for those that are looking at it that way? Share some of that with us if you don't mind.
Sure, thanks. So first off, I just want to make note that every single person right now on this screen is part of the Pink Mentor Network.
There you go.
And I wouldn't have met any of them if it wasn't for the Pink Mentor Network and Stacy Cascio. So I just want to give Stacy a shout out and the Pink Mentor Network. So there's so many reasons that I wrote this book, and I've talked about several in other sessions that we've had. But in terms of mindset, mindset plays such a huge part in emotional intelligence because our thoughts create our reality, both at a psychological level and at a physical chemical level. It's a mind-body connection, and a lot of people are just not aware of that. They don't realize how interconnected it is and that there is so much science behind it. So that was one part of the book that I talk about, the mechanics of the mind, and really took a deep dive into the chemistry and even the evolution of why we act and behave in the ways that we do.
That's awesome. I think that makes great sense, right? You often talk about, the need to be relaxed or chill out or calm down. And really that comes from some of this natural ability that it actually has a physical effect on
exactly
what you do. So Kim, if you will, quick introduction, talk to me a little bit about, your background, what your thoughts are around mindset, and then we'll jump to Lianne.
Yeah, thank you, Blair. I love the topic of mindset. It's not an easy conversation for me because it was something I came to a little bit late in life. And it's never too late to learn something new. But I always get very resentful when I see young people. I see people, at a younger age getting it. I'm like, man, I wish I had gotten it earlier on. But for me, I'm in Charlotte. To start with that, I did meet Brittney through the Pink Mentor. And I think that a large part of my journey right now is crafting the community that supports me and that I can serve and that serves me well. And in shifting my mindset, I've been able to drastically change what that looks like. And I think this conversation in itself is all about the community that we decide to craft for ourselves. My message is always about self-care and loving of yourself and being able to love yourself and loving what you do, and then using the tools that help you do both of those things. So that's my message across many of the platforms that I talk against. But I know we're going to be talking more about that specifically, but that's what I want to share at the onset.
That's awesome. That'll be, again, perfect for today. And I'm anxious to hear some of those details too, selfishly. So Lianne, same thing, because a couple minutes, just quick overview, a little bit of your background, and some of your initial thoughts on mindset and how it relates to emotional intelligence.
So what was interesting is I had never made that connection between emotional intelligence and mindset. So getting to know Brittney and following this, it's been fascinating how I've been able to kind of fill in the blanks for myself. I am a business owner here in Charlotte, and I've known about the Pink Mentor Network long before I ended up joining it. And joining it was probably one of the best things that's ever happened, because I get to hang out with great people like you guys. So I'm a business owner here. I own a business called The Clutter Consultant. And what's amazing is I started it because I just wanted to clean closets. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted some spa money. And I ended up discovering that through that, not only was I able to help people feel better in their spaces, like I had done as a child and growing up, but I was also able to empower women who worked with me to feel better about themselves. And that really became what my mission, it shifted completely. It totally took it off the whole money for the spa to how can I empower other people to feel good about themselves. And I got to do it not only for clients, but also for the ladies that helped me with my mission.
Wow, that's awesome. I love when you, just in general in life, when you start out down a path with the intended outcome, and then you get all these additional outcomes or knowledge, these moments of like these epiphanies of like, wait, I was hoping to just do this and paint that wall blue, but guess what? In the process of picking out the paint, I learned all these other things. That's really cool. That's really, really cool. So having said that, let me just maybe start by saying, I think there is in general an understanding that the ability to have an ingoing mindset into something, and maybe not necessarily what comes out of it, a meeting, an interaction, a relationship of some kind. So before we dive into your stories, give me a little bit of your thoughts on how do you manage to control, or how do you manage to have an ingoing thought and carry that through a conversation or carry that through an engagement? So Lianne, if you have a client, how do you carry that through the process? You start there and understand its role, and then how do you carry that through with somebody you might be working with?
Very slowly.
Okay.
Yeah, very slowly, because I'm in someone's personal space, right? I mean, I fold their underwear, so it doesn't get more personal than that.
Right.
So it's sticking to your guns. It's being soft. It's being slow. It's not pushing my agenda. It's finding out what is theirs and how can I meet them to really support what they're looking for. That would be
the main focus.
The main focus.
That'd be great. And Kim, how about you? How do you maybe, to your point, coming at it maybe a little bit, like you said, later in your life and having some jealousy around the 20-somethings that have already figured this out? How do you stay devout through the process when engaging folks or talking to people?
So, I have a close relationship to the clutter as well. A lot of my journey and transition that I've experienced in the last 4 years is directly tied to me addressing clutter in my life. Wow. So Lianne, and that mission is something I'm very profoundly close to. I have a channel called Release to Receive. So it's the notion of things that no longer support you and making room for things that do. And because in walking through that clutter journey and understand my own clutter need and what that meant for me, and unlocking it and realizing and exploring the ideas and the emotional tie to clutter for me, and walking through that and finding out that it was more than just clutter, and why if you saw my office right now, you think is she's still not healed, but it's a
Right.
process for me, but I know like my stumbling blocks and my challenges, but also what it's helped me to do, because I feel like I'm related to Lianne in that way. But I'm a technology consultant, so I meet a lot of people through transition, and but for me, like Lianne said, even though technology, you're going onto a client site and it's about their systems and their processes, I take it as my responsibility as the people are doing their job. They know how to do it. They come into work at 9, they leave at 5. Everything else in their life may be uprooted and unhinged, but they know how to do their job. And I'm a change consultant, and I'm coming in with my grandiose ideas, like Leanne's talking about. She's coming in with transformation on her heart, right? She knows what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like, but people can't see that and they're not ready for that. And you have to care for their heart. And even in what I do, I care for that you are still first a person and that this is a change. And so I approach my work this much the same way, even though we're in basically two different fields, but it's still a form of leadership and servanthood, and how we approach both of our work.
Wow, that's awesome. That's terrific perspective too. I mean, as you think about clutter as more than just a physical thing, right? There's clutter all around. So Brittney, what are your thoughts of mindset continuity? How do you start in a place with this and then carry it through a process or an interaction?
Wow. I think Kim and Lianne just hit it on the head. I don't think I can say it any better than they said it. And for me, I find it challenging at times, because although I've been where many of my clients are, and that's where I try to bring that mindset in, you can empathize with their feelings. You've been in similar situations, and trying to hold that throughout the process. But it can be very difficult, because for me, when I face that resistance from a client, I get upset for them, not to them. Obviously, that wouldn't be very emotionally intelligent. But inside, there's this just where you want to strangle them sometimes, because you see the finish line.
Right.
But then you have to bring that mindset in there and say you have to be patient, because it took you 7 years to get where you are today. So why should it take them this week or even next month to get to where they want to go? So it's all about,
That's great. Yeah. So if you don't mind, Kim, why don't you take us through your story, how you arrived at this place of consciousness around mindset, and how it's manifested itself today?
So because we're on the subject of clutter a little bit, through weaving a lot of Lianne and what she does. And for me, that was really transformational for me. And I'm a shopper. I'm someone who deeply believes in finding the best discount. I used to work for a commercial goods company for 14 years. So I have every size hammer level. I have a 6-foot level. So if you need to build a house, I'm your girl. So every ounce of commercial goods that you need, I'm a holder of in some way, shape, or form. And I was known as the place where you can go and pick up your Christmas shopping, or, just retaining so much stuff. And I was just tired of my garage. It was non-functional. It was 2-car garage, floor to ceiling, left to right of stuff. All kinds of stuff. I buy furniture, I redo furniture, I paint furniture, I sell it, or I just buy and keep, right? And so my whole philosophy is, when I walk into a store, is like I have this sense of, you are too good of a desk to leave here. I just can't do that to you. Somebody needs to have you, and I'm going to find you a good home. But I just never finished the deal in finding anything a good home. I just brought things home. So years and years and years of this created this space that was just overwhelmingly, and something was really just pulling at me that I needed to move past it in a way. And the best way to do that was just to out myself. That's just the only way I can put it. And I went on Facebook. I made this big pronouncement. I'm going to share a secret so big, and I'm going to do it live. And I did a whole live about showing my garage. People were shocked when I lit up that door. But it was so freeing to share just the ugly part of my garage. And what happened was I shared what, that I was going to get rid of this stuff, that I was going to release it. That's where the whole release to receive came in. And something happened at the end of this video, because this is something I truly felt. I felt like God was speaking to my heart and saying that where you needed to go, this stuff was an anchor. And that when you release this anchor, you're going to be free to move on to your next part of your journey. And I felt that so deeply. And through the process of working through that, I did hire someone to come in and help me understand. I did some research. I started understanding my triggers. And so for me, a large part of the clutter for me was because I moved so much in childhood, that clutter represented safety.
Okay.
And me keeping things actually represented me being safe from harm. And it was a physical reminder. But of course, when I started releasing things, that became very scary. And so working through all of that challenge for me, and then I started reading and understanding that not just physical clutter, but when you're holding on to mindset and things you're thinking about yourself, and being able to release old ideas of who you thought you were, releasing friendships and relationships that no longer served you, like things that were so bogging you down and so negative that you were holding on to them for you didn't even know what reason. And being able to challenge that and asking yourself questions. Does this support me? How do I feel about this? Is this person in my life for this reason? Just asking yourself questions. And it wasn't until I was willing to face those relationships and questions, my job, finding the job that would support me. And basically what I set out to do was to create and craft a lifestyle that supported me. And so I changed everything. I changed my tribe. I changed my job. I changed what I do. I changed how I show up. I changed how I support and lead others. I changed how I mentor. And it started with me just being willing to release the things that no longer served me. So more in that, there's lots of stories in that, but we could be all day. But that is the foundational part of everything that I put together in the last 4 years.
Wow. So first of all, that's amazing. And I love how much you literally pulled from that. Did you have any anticipation that when you were going to make that seminal video and display it, that this would be the magnanimous outcome? Did you feel something like this is going to be a moment, or are you surprised by all that's come after?
I'm surprised at what's come after specifically, but I'm not surprised because in that moment, even when I go back to that video and watched it, there was a moment toward the end where I literally caught my breath. Like it literally came on me like a feeling, a physical feeling that this was weighing me down. Yeah. And to release this was going to be amazing. I literally felt that presence. Like I literally felt it. And you could see it on the video because people called me after because they were checking to see if I was okay, because you could physically see it on my face. That something came over me like this is the start of something. I just didn't know what.
Wow. Amazing. Well, that's part of this whole idea of understanding what it means and then living this as you continue to, right? How self-aware you can be around all of this as you continue. So Lianne, why don't you share with us a bit of your, this journey you've been on and how mindset has playing a role for you and how it persists and manifests today?
So first off, Kim, great job. That's awesome. I get to witness that on a regular basis, and it's pretty cool when someone really is able to let go of that stuff that's holding them where they are, because when you let go of that stuff, then you are free to move on. So it does serve as an anchor. So congratulations for cutting that cord. Good job. Exactly. Totally. So for me, so I didn't grow up in a very happy household, and my big shift happened. I was fortunate. It happened when I was small. Do you remember as a little girl wearing the noisy shoes? Remember the little patent leather shoes, and you wore them and you felt like your mom because your mom had the noisy shoes, and you'd walk and they'd clickety clack. So I was out running errands with my mom, and we stopped at a local place to eat. So I was little, probably like 4. So where do you think we went to eat? Any ideas? Are you ready? It was not McDonald's. We went to the local diner, and
oh, nice.
it was owned by like a local family, and they would meet you at the door, and they had lollipops and the whole thing. So we had the same waitress that took care of us every time. Cool. She sat us in a 2-person booth, which meant as a 4-year-old with my noisy little shoes, I got to sit across from my mom like a big girl. And just like my mom, I looked at every page of that menu. I looked at every picture. And just like my mom, I put the menu at the end of the table when I was done. And the waitress comes over. She's snapping her gum. She's got a little wagger. And she takes my order, and she's got a big grin the whole time. And then she turns to my mom to take my mom's order. And my mom talks to her like this. She's short. She's curt. She's like almost mean. And I watched the waitress turn around with her shoulders slumped. She stopped snapping her gum. She's like dragging her feet as she walked away. And it was in that moment. Now, I can't tell you what the exact words I used when I was 4, but what the meaning of it was, I was going to be happy. No matter what happened in my life, I was going to be happy, because the way that waitress came over and made me felt so good. And when she walked away, to see what someone could do. Now, my mom had her own things going on, but to see that could happen, I didn't choose.
You want to be a part of that, yeah.
So that mindset shift for me happened, or awareness happened really early to change that. So I've always been, or tried to be, somebody who's, a little bit more happy, a little bit more bubbly. I think I've succeeded at that. I used to run a networking group, and they used to call me your cup of effervescence.
Oh my gosh, that's great. That's great. So now talk to me more about how that translates into what you do today. Going back to the idea of helping people declutter their lives.
So when you are letting go of that stuff, what makes you happy? So Kim had taken these things, which we see with a lot of people. When you bring things into your life, when people bring in a lot of stuff, it's padding, right? It's padding against whatever it was that was making you unhappy. You almost make like a barrier, a physical barrier against the emotion that's holding you in place. When you start going through that stuff and letting it go, for some people, it can be it can bring up those emotions that they're trying to protect themselves from. So what I do, we see that all the time. I had one woman, she met me at the front door, and she looked like she was going to throw up. I said, "Do you want to do this another day?" She's like, "No, it's because we're doing this. I look like this." Oh. It took 5 4-hour sessions of working with her before she could touch her own things in her home, because it just brought up so much stuff. What was great is that I had done all that as a kid in my own house, going through all of our stuff and working through my own issues. And being tidy helped me control what was going on outside. So I kind of skirted into a few things there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So one more thought on that. How then do you draw the link between the rest of their lives? How do you draw parallels between the idea of removing something in a closet also might mean moving a toxic relationship, or removing a safety net, a safety relationship, even though it may not be the best one?
So what's interesting is when someone starts going through their things, so say the closet, if you start going through your closet and you start letting go of a shirt with, super long pointy collar that nobody's wearing anymore, or a wide tie, or some of those really crazy pants that we wore back in the day, right? If you start letting go of that stuff, it's letting go of who you were, or who you thought you were, or what the voice in your head is telling you. So when you walk into your closet and you've got say a dress, and the dress is a size 4, because when you were 20 years old, you were a size 4. But today you've had the maturity of life, and now you're a size 8. But every time you see that size 4, you're telling yourself you're fat. But when you let go of that 4, and the closet is filled with 8s that fit you and you look fantastic. Yeah. It's easier to let that go. So it's kind of a backdoor way of addressing it without physically handling those questions.
Wow. That's really cool. That's really cool. It's funny because I think about things that we so easily exchange in our lives without having any connection to it, right? So like we upgrade our phones all the time. We never fall in love with an old version of our phone. I mean, maybe we keep it because we want to be green. We don't want to chuck, but like, right. New phone's coming out. Let's go. I'm ready. Our laptop, this laptop is my 7th version of this laptop in my 11 years at Ortho, right? So it's fascinating how we have a connection to something because it may mean something more personally. Really, really fascinating. Brittney, how do you think, I'd love your take on both of those stories. Give me some of your reactions to those stories.
Yeah, so first I have to disclose that I just got a new phone like last week or the week before. I've had my phone for 6-7 years. It was an iPhone 6.
So I take back what I said.
So I am not one. I'm not one to upgrade. In fact, my husband was like, I will buy you a new phone. Just please, just get a new phone. I'm like, but it works just fine. But it's interesting because Kim and Lianne's stories speak to me as well from my upbringing and the whole clutter situation. And because of that, I became a super neat freak because I felt when I was a child, I didn't have control of the situation, of my life, of anything. And so when I moved out of my home, instead of having a house of clutter, I had a house that was very well organized to the point that I was diagnosed with OCD because anything out of its place gave me severe anxiety, right? And it's all about a mindset. And then I think about not just the things like within our homes, but I know we're talking about relationships very briefly, and that kind of got me to thinking about the relationships that I had been in the past and why I stayed in those relationships for so long. And it was all because of the mindset that I had about myself and the fact that I felt that I needed someone in my life. That if I didn't have that other person in my life, then my life, what was it? It was worth nothing. So I've only been in like maybe 4 relationships my entire life. And each of them were very long relationships. And I would hop from one to the next to the next. Literally, the day that I broke up with someone was the day I started dating again, because I just could not stand being alone with myself. And I think that speaks volumes in itself. If you want to dig deeper into that, why could I not be by myself? And so it wasn't until I shifted my mindset and really started to ask a lot of the questions and bring about that self-awareness that I realized how to find that compassion and love for myself and change that negative narrative and, end up in the relationship that I'm in today. But mindset is a huge role for anyone. Whatever your mindset is, your reality will be.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, I'm wondering, Kim, when you shared that story, did you get people reacting to you on this level? They understood that they had a similar moment of self-awareness that they had to, I like the way you put it, right? Release to receive. I like the idea that, did they identify with that? Did they recognize it? Or did you have to go through your journey a bit and then they looked back and said, okay, I understand what you're saying here, what you're feeling?
Oh, yeah. A lot of people, when I say the words, when I post or share stories and or I'm in, networking groups and I talk about, because that's how I frame it up. When I talk about my story or I talk about, and I'll say, to make it easier for people to comprehend, when I say the words release to receive, people get it immediately. They clearly get what I'm saying. So for the people the onlookers, the people that have been part of my story from the beginning, what surprised me most about the video that I didn't understand when I first got, because like I said, it was just a feeling. It was kind of like you're stuck. And I think this would be huge if I could share it. And I really don't want to, but I know that's the fear talking. So you just do it anyway. And what surprised me the most were people that reached out to me behind the scenes and they said, thank you for being so transparent and authentic about this, because I've been dealing with this on my own, of an area in my life that I need to cleanse. And your transparency and you're, who you are, gave me courage to tackle this area. And that's the first time that I knew that there was a reason why I felt compelled to do it. And it wasn't necessarily just for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I've gotten that along the way as I've grown. And even when I think I'm not being, because when I post or when I share a lot of my story, it's not from I just need to release it. It's because I lived through a long decade of sadness. And like Lianne just shared about just being a happy person, just deciding to be happy. I don't necessarily just decide to be happy. I just decide I just don't want to be sad. And my whole thing is that I have no more days to devote to sadness. I have moments that I can give myself and be aware of my sadness, but we're not going to sit in it all day. And so a lot of times when I post, it's to provide inspiration for people that need to see light, because someone, was shining a light when I needed it most. And I do it because someone else just needs that reminder that, it's not been easy. It was necessary. And that there are people that can be an inspiration. And I just think that if I survived it, anybody can survive, going through hard things.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I share is just purely out of just don't give up. There's always tomorrow, and it does not have to look like what it looks like today. And I just try to provide that inspiration whenever I get a chance to have a platform to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, before we started today, we briefly chatted about, that there are some, maybe the generation behind us, right? The youngest of them, the newest of them, may have a different degree of self-awareness earlier on than maybe we did. Maybe not Brittney, but the rest of us, right? and I think, that you find yourself becoming a bit of a teacher beyond mentorship, right? Where you can meet 1-to-1, you can meet 1-to-6, you can meet and expose them to what you've learned. Do you see yourself as almost kind of being a teacher to the generation that's coming behind us to say it's better to have it earlier? We in one of our earlier sessions, we talked with some educators, and we talked in detail about sometimes the gap that young folks had in school. We don't talk about emotional intelligence. We don't even address it in some of the situations. And so it's blind to them until they have a moment where they become self-aware. Do you find yourself feeling like an educator in that respect?
I do have an audience that when I look at, like my Instagram, and I look at other places where, that gives me the demographics of people that react to my post, is 35 to 44-year-olds, which was surprising to me being in my 50s. It's kind of like I didn't realize that was the case. And so it's nothing that I intentionally do. It just happens naturally. A lot of people that I find, even from the technical aspect of what I do, I'm very passionate about what I do professionally. People bring me their friends to mentor. And they'll say, I'm very passionate in this space. Kimberlyn is someone who's very passionate. Can you help my friend? They're looking for insight on this. They're looking for that. I've rejected the notion of life coach for a long time. And I would be on interviews. Last year, I was on an interview, and they were like, have you thought about being a life coach? I'm like, I'm interviewing for a completely different job. No, I'm not a life coach. I don't want to be a life coach. And I just share a little bit of my journey and how I, choose to coach. And my coaching version is just helping people, but it keeps surfacing. And so what I channel now is that once I learned about my strengths. So when you shared about being able to talk to people, one of my strengths is individualization. That's a core strength of mine. And individualization is the ability to reach people at where they are. So my gift is that when I speak to a 30-year-old, I can actually reach them at that level. I don't reach to them from my perspective. I reach to them from theirs. And that's a gift and a strength that I have that I didn't realize was something that I could actually tap into. And I've just learned to do that better. So
wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that people recognize that about you and are willing to say she can help because she has this skill set. Right? I think that to me is always a big thing as well, too. There's something about being self-aware is knowing you don't know everything. So go find someone who does. Right? So
Henry Ford, right?
Say that again.
That was Henry Ford. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know where to go to get it.
You just have to know who to find to go get it. Exactly right. Yeah. So Lianne, do you see some of those same moments kind of education? You might be working with a client and all of a sudden you see that moment where you're like, wow, I'm actually educating them on more than just helping them in this, 5 square feet of closet space. Maybe this is actually a bigger piece. Do you find yourself becoming a bit of like an educator? You're informing?
Absolutely. So it's almost like teasing it out of them when we're talking, because we're talking with their stuff, which is an inanimate object, which is a great way to kind of tap into what's going on inside. And when we can kind of address, why are you hung up on this? Why can't you let this go? Why is that happening? We can kind of tease out what they're holding on to, and then that kind of brings it to light, and then they can work through it to let it go. So it's kind of, I'm always asked if I'm a therapist. I'm like, no, I am not a therapist, and I don't have training to be a therapist, but I can help you if you want to keep that top.
Yeah. But I see that, like hearing both of you talk, I will admit, I thought to myself a bit around, wow, there is a bit of like catharsis here where you expose yourself to somebody and then they help correct your action, or they help expose you to maybe a new way of thinking, which is some fundamental basis in therapy, right? I mean, is that, well, maybe it's not relationship driven or coach driven because there's some anonymity there, but I can see some of that. So Brittney, where in the book do you think this plays out the most? For those listening or those that want to pick up a copy of this, how can some of what these two women shared translate into some parts of the book?
Yeah, definitely the section for mechanics of the mind, because it talks about our thought processes and how we think and why we think the things that we think and how to alter that, but also being a catalyst for change. So it's scattered throughout the book because the book is in 3 sections, right? And so there's sections throughout that teaches us how to become self-aware. And then there's parts that go more into the science of why we think the way we do, and the science of even being self-aware.
Yeah, no, and I think that's great. And then, while I've got you on the big screen, why don't you maybe share a little bit of your thoughts around that? Do you ever find yourself being a bit of an educator, a bit of a teacher around some of this, and how does that work for you? How do you feel being in that space?
Yeah, so education's always kind of been the place that I wanted to be. That was like my first major. And so I've always wanted to educate people because I've always found that to be fun. But I think having such a deep connection and tied to what I'm educating people on really changes the way that I approach them and how I educate them. And I'm sure Kim and Lianne can both relate to that. When you've been there and done that, it's completely different how you approach it than if you were just trained on a subject and then just regurgitate that information. And so you have a little bit more empathy and patience and understanding. And looking back through some of the videos that I have when I first started speaking and doing workshops, and looking at that now and how I communicated the information is vastly different than how I communicate it today. And before, it was more of, here's what emotional intelligence is. Here are the elements of emotional intelligence. And it was just all about the information. But now when I speak about it, I really speak from a personal perspective, and the growth that's happened, since I started my own journey on emotional intelligence. So yes, I believe that we're educators and teachers, but we're so much more than that, right? Because when I think of a teacher, I just think of someone that's giving us that skill set, but we're so much more than that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. I wonder too, as you all have been talking, I was thinking a little bit, about some of my personal experiences, and I'm curious to get your take on this idea. So, one of my mindsets is, today is the most important day. And I try to think about it in the sense that, to your point about, I like the way you said it, Kim, is I choose to not be sad. It doesn't mean I'm always going to be, happy 100%. I just am going to choose to not be sad. So I try to say, okay, it doesn't mean I'm going to try to jump out of a plane every day or try some random food I've never had before. But I try to say, okay, today is let's try to be the best at what I can be today. Let's try to have the most fun I can have today. Let's try to experience the best, relationships while I can today, because you never know when you don't have another day. And what's interesting about that is I was divorced 10 years ago, and I don't look back on my divorce as failure. I just look back I respect it for the time that it was, and I'm not going to create any hatred for when it was great. It ended, and then the next chapter began. So again, going back to what you said, Kim, of I'm receiving something beneficial because I've released it to its special place. It's out in its own place and it lives there, and I can reflect on it, versus looking at maybe the last, 3, 6, or 9 months, which were not so great of that relationship, but it doesn't invalidate the 13 years that I was married before it. So I'd love your guys' comment on that. How do you think that fits into having this self-awareness or this mindset moment where you put these things in their place and they occupy a space in the world? Doesn't mean that you necessarily have to manifest hatred on them. Or maybe the reverse is, don't unnecessarily make them glorious if they don't deserve it.
Yeah, I would love to add my comment on that, because that was a hard lesson for me to learn, to say goodbye to things and relationships that you valued, or my marriage as well that ended. And what I found, and this was me Googling, I Googled all over the internet, how to heal from this, Like, you feel like you're holding on to this. You don't know if it's anger or disappointment. You're trying to figure out, I'm looking for community or people to express what I'm feeling. And I don't have the exact quote, but the feeling around it is, and like you said, the ending wasn't so great, but there was this part of it that was wonderful. So when you're holding on to it in such a way that it no longer supports you, you're actually devaluing the parts that were wonderful. And you're devaluing everything that it brought you as part of that experience. So, by putting it in its place and giving it the value that it was this is something that I've done. This is what I grew from that. These are relationships that spurned from that time. These are the things that came, the fruit that was able to be born from that time. That was wonderful. It ended badly, but by placing the value on the bad part and not the good part, actually is not a gift. Your gift is that this was a wonderful time that ended badly, and I'm going to sit it over here and value it for what it was, but I'm willing to release it and not let it have hold over me. That was really powerful for me to take on for myself.
Yeah, so I would sympathize with you there and agree 100%. I went through almost an identical experience, and my fruit too is I had 3 kids from it, who are around today and are important to me today, and all that great stuff. So, what do you think, Lianne?
Totally agree. So my words around it are, what is the lesson that you can get from the time that was spent? And then what's the gift you got out of it? So if you think of life as like a video game, video games don't have an ending. So when you start the game, you start with like the basic outfit, right? You've got a pair of sneakers, and you got a jeans, and you got a little t-shirt. And then, you solved the first puzzle, you made it through the first challenge, and now you've got sneakers with a better tread on them. So you get to have those to get through to the next challenge. So every time that you go through, the next thing you know, right, you got rocket sneakers and a cape hanging off of you and, a magic wand. So as you move through life, all of these experiences, all of these things that happen, they happen to teach you something, maybe to learn something, maybe for you, or maybe for you to be able to bring to somebody else. And that's why you go through them. And it's not always meant just for you. Sometimes it's meant that you do share and mentor the previous generation. Or you never know who you're going to be sitting on a EQ Deficiency book tour and having the opportunity to share this with somebody else.
Exactly.
So that's why you go through these things. It's not to focus on the bad. It's not to, be effervescent all the time. It's that's kind of like your anchor point, and then you can move from there.
Yeah, that's great. Brittney, what are your thoughts about kind of placing it in its spot. And I know you briefly chatted about relationships earlier, but I'd love your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, it's funny. As I was listening to Kim and Lianne speak, when Kim was speaking, I kept thinking of a pair of shoes and how you outgrow your shoes as you get older, but you may have a pair of shoes that you loved, but now your foot doesn't fit in it right. It's uncomfortable. Maybe you've wore holes in it, whatever. The point is it doesn't fit you. And then Lianne kind of hopped on the video game talking about the shoes. So it just made me think of that because I know I'm fairly young to say that I've already been married twice, but I've been divorced as well. And when I look at that, you know, for the longest time, I had so much resentment and I was angry at myself because I thought I was with this guy from 15 years old to 23 years old. Like that is, you know, the prime of your youth. That's when you go off to college and you make friends and you're being like a teenage kid and a young adult. And instead of doing all those things, I glued myself to this one person and shut every other person out of my life. And so when that relationship ended, I had no one, or at least I felt like I had no one. But looking back, that person served a purpose. Like Kim was saying, it serves a purpose. And then once you've outgrown that purpose and you have grown as a person, then you find something else or someone else or a mindset that serves you better, you know? And I think that's the hardest part, is to appreciate sometimes those good things, because all you can focus on are the negative, especially when it happens, and it can be super painful. But again, that's all a mindset. That's your choice on, is the glass half full or is it half empty? And am I going to cling to this, like Kim said, or am I going to release it? And like Lianne said, everything is a journey. We continue, we move on, we grow and develop.
Yeah. So I have a very tactical question for the three of you as I listen to your stories. Do you guys journal? Do you keep track of these moments? Do you chronicle when they happen in some way? Do you say, "Ooh, that was interesting. Let me dialogue on this at all"?
Mostly my journaling is around dreams. I have very specific guided visuals that come to me. And sometimes I journal. I was sharing a story a few weeks ago about I was having a pity party, and I just was angry. And when you're angry and having a pity party, what's the best thing to do? Oh, get on social media and look up old boyfriends, because that's going to really cheer you out. And so I found myself in this hole of just despair. And you're just like, I just need to go to bed. Just need to go to bed, because that's just, I don't choose to just live in this. So I'm just going to go to bed. But before I went to bed, I said, just let me write about it. And that's normally something I don't do, like just write, just to be writing. I'm writing because I've been given a dream and I've written out very detailed journaling. But this particular time, I was just writing just out of pure frustration of just being angry. And I was writing because I was angry, and I wasn't angry to the point that I could cry. And I was mad that I couldn't cry about it. Like, I was mad that I couldn't fall apart. I wanted to fall apart. I wanted to have a pity party and a tantrum, but I didn't have that in me to have that tantrum. And I was mad that I was not that person that could literally just fall apart. And then I was mad because I started cursing in the journaling, and I was writing it with my church pen. So then I was mad about that. Like, you're cursing and you're writing with the church pen, like how you're just the lowest level of a human being at this point. And it was just an all out, just a madness. And but then as I started writing, and I was like, but that's not how you were built.
Right.
That's not how you were built. You weren't made that way, because you actually know that you are amazing. Yeah. And you actually know that you are doing amazing things right now, and that there's so much other goodness in your life. And I just wrote myself out of that despair. And that was just something that I don't do often, but I'm glad it's a tool. And so I do speak about writing and journaling for that reason, because just writing and reflecting, I do write gratitude, as far as sometimes in my daily practice, I do take the time to write, what I'm grateful for. I actually have a detailed planner that I use. It talks about starting your week and doing planning. And so I journal around that. But I think writing what you're grateful for, especially when you're not feeling so grateful, is a wonderful way to shift your mindset. And it's a tool that I do use.
That's great. And how about you, Lianne? I saw you about to speak up too.
Yeah, so we do, what we do is we've taken pieces of paper as a family, and at the end of the day, when we try to come up with something that's positive that's happened, and then at the end of the year, go through that pile, and you have 365 different events that happened that were positive. So it's not journaling per se, but it is journaling. It's just a way of capturing all those positive things, and suddenly the year doesn't look so bad, even if if there was some bumps in the road along the way, because that's what happens. It's called life. And it's just a great way to kind of remember, just keep that positive spin on everything, which helps. And another great thing to do before you go to bed at night is to do your appreciation. So you can go around the dinner table and you appreciate each other, and you give an appreciation. What I appreciate about you is, and then at the end, if you want to up level it, you do, and what I appreciate about myself is. So it's a great way to kind of bring all that to the forefront.
Wow, that's great too. That would be great to do. Yep.
So not exactly journaling, but journaling.
No, I get it. Brittney?
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, now I want to do that. I want to see what I come up with for the year. I wonder what 2020 would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried journaling several times. I had a friend in elementary school who was a very devoted journaler. She had books and books and books and books. And I know people who have done that, who have journaled their entire life, and I would love to go back and read those. I just don't have the patience, I think, to sit and journal every day. But I will say that the times that I did try to start a journal, and then I've found those later in life and I go back, when I read it, it literally takes me back to that moment and that experience and what I was feeling at that time.
Yeah.
And so that makes me kind of regret not keeping one consistently. And then when I left my corporate job and started my business, I wanted to do the first 100 days of being an entrepreneur, because my naive self thought, oh, in 100 days, I'm going to be making the big bucks and I'm going to have clients like lined out the door. And it didn't progress that quickly. So I haven't went back and read that, but I did journal for straight 100 days when I left my job.
Wow, that's great. I was asking that question because, again, I love this conversation. It just informed some of my thoughts that I have rolling around in my head. And I was listening to a podcast this morning. Dax Shepard has a podcast. It's called Armchair Expert, and his guest was Matthew McConaughey, and he just wrote a book. It's a memoir. It's called Green Lights. And when he's explaining the book, Dax says to him, "Why did you call it Green Lights?" And he said, "Because I journaled and wrote down memoirs for 35 years, threw them in like a chest, carried this chest around all around my life of all these journals, and I finally opened them up one day and looked back and found all these red lights and yellow lights in my life that I needed to share with people, because all I wrote about were those moments, forgetting that the space in between them all were all these green lights of how great things can be." And so I hear some of those similarities in what you three are talking about and how it may help. And he ultimately lands directly on, it's now this mindset of saying, like, I'm going to seek the green lights. Like, I'm going to seek not being sad. I'm going to seek, to declutter my world, both physically and relationship wise. And I just found a very interesting parallel between those two. So what are some of the challenges around self-awareness for folks knowing they need to have a certain kind of mindset? Now, hopefully it will be positive and uplifting and progressive and forward thinking. You don't want somebody to have a negative one, but what do folks have to overcome to get there? What are some of the challenges it may take if they're listening now, or if they could use the advice you may share on your journeys? Kim, what might you tell somebody? What are going to be some of the obstacles you may face, and for what you can, how might you suggest they overcome it?
So I like to give an example of how I fell in love with Valentine's Day. So as someone who's been divorced for a long while in corporate America, I used to hate Valentine's Day. Because in corporate America, if you worked for any decent sized company, there is this all day delivery of things.
Right. Everybody around you is getting stuff.
Everybody around you is getting stuff. There's the if you worked in a place where the intercom is the thing, then Susie, can you come to the front office for your package? Right. And it's just all day. And I used to work in companies where I worked near the front. So I would see the influx of balloons and flowers, and it became just a tradition just to hate on Valentine's Day. And the year that I got over it, and really, this is really the mindset shift and the first part of that question is you have to be willing to say, this just does not support me. I don't know why I feel this way. And I want to change it. That's really that really is the starting line of just being willing to say that I don't like feeling this way. And what do I need to do to change it? And so a few years ago, I created these love jars. And much like what Lianne is sharing, I created these love jars. I decorated them, and then I filled them with scraps of paper and I love affirmations. I am beautiful. I am loved. And I kept two versions. I had a version that was already filled and a version that was empty, and I gave you the paper. And I took the day off from my job, and I went around Charlotte, people in my family. I stopped at their jobs and surprised them, my family and friends. And I surprised them with these love jars. And I said, you can either keep it for yourself and you can pull out a love note when you need it most, or you can gift it to someone else who needs it. That moment of just pure giving to other people on that day of love just changed my whole perspective about that day. I no longer have those feelings anymore. And so sometimes the thing that you need the most is the thing you need most to give. And I think that was just a powerful way to rethink a day that had held so many bad memories for me. And I don't approach it now. I don't, think about it, 60 days from now as a day I can start hating it right now. Like I used to literally be thinking about it. I'm going to start hating on Valentine's Day right now. And it no longer takes up space in my heart. And it's so freeing to do that. But I think that it really is choosing to decide I'm going to be aware of what this feeling is and then look for ways to really change it.
That's awesome.
That's beautiful.
That's awesome. How about you, Lianne?
Yeah.
I don't know what I can add to that.
Oh, yeah.
That was great. And then I guess the only thing I could kind of say is once you've made the decision that you want to make a change, is to know that sometimes it can be a little rough. I mean, it's not always easy. I mean, sometimes you have to go home and punch a pillow and slam a door before you can get past that to make the shift, to make the change, and to give yourself space to do it. It's okay if that's what you have to do, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. I mean, you can slam a door or punch a pillow. I mean, that's okay. Take a golf club to your bed mattress. I mean, that'll feel good too. And then you can move forward if you have to.
Yeah. And that's a good thought to keep in mind, right? That there will be obstacles, and it may not be as simple as it's going to happen right away. Once I become self-aware, it may take some time for that to evolve or develop. So that's really good. That's a good tip as well too. Brittney, what are your thoughts about overcoming some of these obstacles, and what might people have to look for to overcome them?
Yeah, so this really is something that I'm dealing with right now with building out this program that I'm creating. I'm in the part of how to develop self-awareness. So I was thinking through this, and I realized that we're really not good with becoming self-aware. 95% of us think that we are self-aware, so we're not going to be able to easily admit that we're not. And how do you find that self-awareness within yourself if you already think you have it? So many people ask the question, why? Why do I feel this way? What caused this? And we're really not good at pinpointing the cause, which is part of self-awareness. So instead of asking, why do I feel this way? Why did this happen to me? We always want to have an answer but what we're probably going to do is plug in an answer that isn't the actual source of that mindset or that emotion or that situation. So instead of worrying about that, focus on, well, what can I do about it? Because that way we don't get stuck in the why. And I know there's a lot of talk, like Simon Sinek talks about, find your why, know your why. And that's very important in certain areas of life. But when it comes to self-awareness, the best question we can ask sometimes is what, if we want to move forward. What am I going to do about it? What could I have done differently? What did I learn from that experience? And by answering the what, sometimes that takes you to that why.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. That's totally awesome. So one other thought I had here is, do you guys find that there's generational, this has come up on every session that we've had, all 5 sessions. Are there generational differences here at play when people are trying to become more in tune with their own mindset? Is it easier or harder? Is it easier to accept, harder to accept? Do people become self-aware more quickly? Do you sense any sort of generational barrier or separation when it comes to this? Lianne, what do you think on that topic?
So I think that overall, we're more of an open society than we've been in the past. We're more open to talking about things. I remember reading a book to my son when he was small that was all about emotions. And I remember when he was in his little 4-year-old class, the teacher said to me, he's so well spoken, like he knows what he's feeling. He doesn't act out because he has the words for how he's feeling. And when I read the book talked about being frustrated. And I said, when I'm frustrated, and, I read it like, and when I'm happy, and I kind of read it with the tone so that he would understand. And I think that as parents, we're doing those things more with our kids, more so than in the past. When I was a kid, it was you're seen and not heard. You were to sit at the table. Now, my son was an only child, and he could sit at a table for 3 hours for a dinner at a restaurant, and we never really had a problem. Now, part of that's the child, but part of that is also that he had a lot of exposure and a lot of ability to express what he was feeling, and he had the words around it. So I think that as we move forward, there are parents that are more open to giving their kids the verbiage versus, we'll just go play, just get away, go do your thing and stay on your own. It's parents are walking them through. I'm on a Facebook group where it's all about moms, and I listen to what the moms are saying, and it's my child is having this issue. What can I do to help? Where in the past, I don't know that was quite as open a conversation, and there weren't as many avenues to find this kind of help. And then, of course, there's people like Brittney who are writing books like this, that's putting this information out there in front of people so that we have that knowledge. I think we have more knowledge than we had before.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to put it. Kim, what do you think about that generational effect on mindset?
It just varies for me because, I talk to people of all ages, and I'm always shocked and surprised by just the clarity of people, like I shared earlier, they have it long before I had it. And I think it's social media. I think it's access to more information. I think it's access to more people sharing their feelings online, it being more acceptable to share it online, sharing it, good or bad. People are definitely people are sharing it, which is giving more people the courage to share it, whether it's misplaced or not. People are more comfortable sharing things. And I think that didn't exist, of course, and there wasn't an avenue or channel to have that exposure. So definitely it's an area where it could be good or bad. And I think that the learning from it is that there are times that this is the feelings and sharing are misplaced, but I think it still encourages people to do more of that. And it's really great to see in part of being in conversations with someone that doesn't look like you, have the same background as you, have the same emotional maturity as you, but they may be going through something very, very similar, and having community. And so a lot of the groups that I'm in, or groups that I run, it's creating the community so people can feel safe to say they're not okay, whatever that would look like. And I think that that's the most that we can do right now, is being able to give people that space, that safe space to be able to share that. But I do think it's varying based on, multiple factors: your parenting, your upbringing, your background. But it is beautiful to see it in its many, many shapes and forms.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So a spin-off on that question is, do you think that there are generations that are less open to changing once they realize something about themselves?
I don't have a direct question in that, but I'll tell you something funny. So my grandmother, I had really, really long hair, and I cut my hair all the way off, like cut it off, went, what we call natural, like short, curly fro, like really, really short. And I cut it all off. So she would just make faces at me, like complete disapproval. And whenever people would compliment me on it and say, "Oh, I love your hair like that. I think it's beautiful like that," she would just sit there with her face all scrunched up, and she'd be basically saying, "But you know how I feel about it." And I said, because we're very close in age, my grandmother, my mom, and me. So I remember my grandmother through her 40s and 50s. And so I said, I'm recalling when you had this kind of haircut and you had that kind of haircut, and you used to come with all these different haircuts. And I just remember you exploring, your hair choices freely without critique. I said, you don't think I'm allowed that same, thing? And so she would never say anything. So I started, growing it back out. So I've changed it a little bit. And she saw me 2 weeks ago, and she just couldn't help herself. She said, I see you're growing your hair out. And I didn't say anything. I said, yeah. I said, I'm probably going to cut it again when I turn 60. She says, really? Like complete disapproval. And I just couldn't help myself. I said, do you think when I turn 60 that I wouldn't need your permission to cut my hair? Do you think, like, what age do you think I would need to be? Just tell me so I'll know. What age do you think I need to be that I don't need your approval? Because what I'm trying to help her understand, that I know she doesn't get, is that I'm beautiful no matter what my hair looks like. And she doesn't realize the message that she's sending every time I make a change is that I'm not beautiful. Right. And my hair is depicting how beautiful she sees me. And that's probably not the message that she's relaying in her disapproval, but that's the message that I received as a young girl. And it's probably a message I received as a very young girl from her when I had long pigtails. And it's just a message that relates. So when I think about the maturity of things like that, it's those things that our adults in our lives have done, and they don't even realize the impact they have made to us little girls.
Right. So
Blair, can I jump in there? So whenever Kim's talking about this, it makes me think about many situations I've experienced, but I've seen this before with other parents and even in relationships and even with friendships. And sometimes it has nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with their perception of themselves and how they see themselves in you. So anything you do, they see it as a direct reflection of who they are. So like the parents who are so proud of their kids and will brag on them all day long when they're making great grades and doing great things in life. But as soon as their child does something they disapprove of, or let's say their kid gets in trouble with the law or something happens, then they're quick to just completely disown that child based on that action. So but it's all about, are they confident in who they are so that they can love you, unconditionally?
Right. And so like that's awesome. And I think that is a hard conversation to have, right? Because it's this, even with, Kim and her grandma, it's like, it's hard to say to somebody who you've looked up to, who's been a part of your life, and you don't want them to think that you disapprove of them in some way. However, it's really annoying or bothersome when they're doing those kinds of things, right? So that's a great point, Brittney. I think there's there's a difficulty there because it's almost cyclical. It's like a circle. It comes back around you. Like, I don't want you to be that way because it makes me look like I did something wrong. However, I'm aware that you are. Right? Yeah. So what do you think, Lianne? You think that there's maybe some folks are less open to this, less willing to take it on?
I do. I think that perhaps people who are younger are a little more open to change and a little more open to just different thought processes and different things. And I think that if you get into some of the older generations, they just aren't as open. So for instance, if I'm in somebody's kitchen and I recommend putting the dishes, especially when I'm working with a senior, let's put the dishes down lower so that you don't have to reach up high because you're having some shoulder issues. So let's put your dishes, which are heavy, down low, and let's put like these pans that are a little bit lighter up higher so that you can reach them better. And they just look at me like I'm, out of my head. But it's just a shift, right? I didn't take anything out of the kitchen. I just changed how I did it. But no, the dishes go in this cabinet and they can't get past that. Or if I'm in a man's closet and I recommend putting the pants on the double hang on the top and put the dress shirts on the bottom because it's easier to put your outfits together because you can see it all. If your pants are on the bottom and your dress shirts are on the top, you have to move the shirts out of the way to see the pants to put an outfit together. So, I mean, it's a simple little thing, but it's why would I put my pants on the top? That they can't get there. But I definitely see people who are a little bit older, a little bit more set in their ways, who are a little bit less inflexible. They can't get there. And that's what they've got, their stories that they've got going in their heads. Because then I'll work with some others that are open to it. But I think in general, the older population just doesn't work well with a lot of shift and change.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And that's some of the things I think it just comes to the territory of knowing more as more generations are on the planet. We know more about more things. We can apply them more rapidly than maybe the generations ahead of us, which I subscribe to. So we have a few minutes left. I would just ask, as you think about this, maybe Lianne, what might you leave folks watching today, listening today? What might you leave them with around, being self-aware, embracing a mindset and the value that it brings to their life from the moment they do going forward?
I would say that perspective is everything. What is the perspective that you want to come from? And what do you want your life to look like? And start acting like it now. Start putting some of those pieces into place now for what you want. That way, as you're moving, it's easier to make that shift and it takes some of the edge off. So I would say that.
That's awesome. Kim, how about you? What would you think? Again, like, you're self-aware, you've got this mindset. What would you suggest folks do now to just today and change?
So Lianne was spot on, exactly what I was going to share, because one of the things that changed everything for me, I was in a session with a coach and they asked me the question, if I were to open my eyes and be anywhere in the world doing anything, what would that look like? And have that described, like describe it in detail. Right. And what I shared was new to me. I didn't know that was something I wanted to do in the moment, but it clearly was something very unlike what my life looked like at the time. So when Lianne shared, like, what is it that you want to, how do you want to show up in this world? How do you want to live? What does your life look like that you aspire it to look like? And make concrete, specific choices that line up to that. And when I heard myself say that I wanted to be in Canada, driving down some snowy highway looking for antiques to populate my antique store, and just a very detailed version of this fantasy. And then the emotion that was then, okay, now you have to go back to work. And how does that feel? And this sinking sensation in my stomach of I'm not living a life that I truly find worthy of me. And being willing, and that's the other part, you have to be willing to take that on, to ask the question and then say, it does not feel like I think it should look like. What are the steps that I can take to identify what I can change to move in that direction. And a large part of the changes that I made was direct response to living a life that felt like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and sometimes that's scary, right? To take those steps, it can be a little bit scary, and that's okay. You don't have to be like, 10 feet out of your comfort zone. You can just be like a pinky toe out to start with, and then, kind of get comfortable with that. And then you can add in maybe the next toe, and then you can add in the next toe. It doesn't have to be like a gigantic jump into a cold pool. It can be just one toe at a time.
But have you met me?
No, you're about the full jump, girl. You're about to hold your nose and go.
No doubt. When I was growing up, I heard a great analogy that stuck with me for decades, which is, if you look at your life as analogous to maybe a ruler, there's all these little centimeter marks, and you kind of go down the line, and every now and then you hit an inch line, and that's a much tougher one to go over. But when you do, you can look ahead to 10 more little ones that you'll accomplish, while knowing down there's probably gonna be another thing that you're gonna have to overcome. So to your point about perspective, Lianne, I very much subscribe to the idea that it's important to have some perspective on it, and maybe no better year for us all to have perspective than 2020, right? I mean, with all the craziness that we've been a part of. So Brittney, what thoughts maybe do you have in terms of establishing that mindset, and here's where you are, and what might be able to take from the book or from you personally that would set you on a path to go forward?
Yeah, so let me just say that you guys have provided some amazing nuggets in this video, and it is going to be so hard to pull some of these out because there's so many, which is amazing. So thank you all for the wonderful insights and wisdom that you guys have shared today. Piggybacking off of what's already been said by Kim and Lianne and you, Blair, everything that we've discussed is about moving forward and not living in the past. And one thing that will keep us stuck in the past is playing the role of the victim, because we can say all day long what we want our lives to look like and ask the what questions. But if we say, well, but it's not my fault that I'm not there yet, or I would be there if it wasn't for X, Y, Z. And so we then keep pushing ourselves back in the past and we can't move forward. So that's one thing that I would just want to share with people is, in order to get to where you want to go, you have to let go of where you've been and playing that role of the victim. And I talk about that in my book as well, because that you just can't have both. Now, you can always use the past, as we've talked about, as a learning experience, but that should be what it is a learning experience, not something to dwell on.
Yes, some place you dwell. Yeah, all very powerful sentiments. So, well, this has been awesome conversation today, and what a terrific session 5 to end our sessions with. This one, super heartfelt dialogue today, and I think to Brittney's point, so many moments of like poignancy with sound bites and ideation, and I think these very heartfelt conversations today, which has just been great. So I just want to thank you all for being a part of it. Thank you for supporting Brittney on the book tour. Hopefully you'll be able to take bits and pieces from the book and share the knowledge and continue to do all the great things you're doing. And I guess I'll just see you all at a Pink Mentor Network event at some point in the near future, which would all be very, very cool. So thank you all very much for the time. It's been my pleasure to host all these too, Brittney. So thank you for the opportunity to do so. Thank you all. It has been, I'm so grateful for all of this. Blair, for you sticking it out every week with me, taking a couple hours out of your week for this and your prep work. So thank you so much. Lianne, Kim, it has been amazing to have you guys on. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.